Georgia officials have spoken on the Russian threat reported during voting, and the Georgia officials in a press conference have confirmed that it was a bomb threat. Listen in.
Anyone is fair and accurate elections, and anything that can get us to fight among ourselves, they can count that as a victory. So that tells you a little bit about the Russians. They're not our friends. Anyone that thinks they are hasn't been reading the newspapers.
All right. That's an unnerving development that has taken place. There was a bomb threat. The Georgia officials at this point of time have addressed it. They've spoken to the media and said that the officials are going to take this threat seriously. I have with me Grand Newsham, and how do you react to this? You know, just moments ago there were these insinuations being cast that there was Russian meddling in the American elections. Now we're getting to know that there's a bomb threat. So there's a lot of it that is happening now. You know, do we take this on face value, or this at this point of time has to be screened and finally figure out what is actually the truth versus what is misinformation that is being peddled?
Oh, I think that the way our elections have worked the last few times, that nobody's really surprised at anything. I'd probably be surprised if there wasn't a bomb threat. It could be the Russians. They've, of course, been meddling, but they're just small potatoes compared to the Chinese communists. So with this one, as I say, if you've been around a while, you sort of brush it off, and let's get through with the voting, see how it turns out.
Okay. Grant, obviously, I want to ask you, have you already cast your vote? Was it early voting, or today did you step out?
No, I voted a couple days ago. I happened to be in my jurisdiction, so I voted in person. I don't feel good about dropping them in a mailbox. I suppose I'm old enough that I think that we stand in line on voting day and we go vote. So that's what I was fortunate enough to be able to do. Since I'm not from Chicago, I didn't vote 2 or 3 times. I only voted once.
Okay, all right. I'll come back to that question. And I also have with me Ambassador Yogesh Gupta. He's a former diplomat. Thank you, sir, for joining me on the telecast. And again, the focus, that's big news, a bomb threat. This cannot be, sidelined. This has to be then further investigated upon. But how does this impact the election process?
Well, yes, I have read about that. One doesn't know how much that is true or not, but these are things, which other countries do as well. The United States, the USA interfered in India's election as much as it could. So what is there to be surprised? Major countries, they do interfere, and United States including, in the elections of other countries. And so normal game.
Okay. All right. I also have with me Rick Mehta. And Rick, let's understand from you. Welcome on the show. And did you cast your vote today?
No, I'm going this afternoon. I'm going to wait for my kids to get home. I think it's important for our future generations to see how the voting takes place. So we like to go on the day of Election Day. And so it's a special day for us. So we'll be casting our votes in a couple hours. Okay,
absolutely. Do you think Republicans are a little more hesitant than the Democrats when the matter of early voting is discussed?
This is the first time we've seen in many swing states and states across the country where Republicans lead Democrats in early voting, or led Democrats in early voting, which is very interesting. It's quite an interesting phenomenon. There is a bit of herd mentality around that. And I think Republicans are accepting of the fact that they must cast their votes. And what we call, what the Republicans have been crying, the America First Republicans, about too big to rig. Make sure enough votes are cast so that the margin of error due to irregularities can be overcome. So I think that's actually exciting, where Republicans have been traditionalists and have casted their votes on the day of election. The fact that they're opening up to go earlier means they're embracing new ways of voting and getting engaged into the electoral process early. So that's a good sign.
Okay. Also, Donald Trump has cast aspersions in the past as well. 2020 elections, he's insinuated this time around as well that if there is a delay in the counting of the votes, there is likelihood of some foul play that takes place in the election. He's also insinuated there could be poll rigging, there could be, the stolen election narrative that he had built in 2020. Do you think if there is more and more people who cast their vote in early voting in that process or postal ballot, the likelihood of the counting of votes extending up unto days and perhaps, I don't know, weeks, but at least days is more of a probability?
Yeah, there's a big difference between this election and the last election cycle, and namely that has to do with COVID. In 2020, the entire country switched to mail-in ballots, and we did see a high level of irregularity. Even in my home state, that's heavily Democrat Attorney General prosecuted against voter fraud and voter irregularities. And so, to say that that doesn't exist is incorrect. And so there should be concerns on both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, that we have a free and fair election. But certainly the fact that there's machine voting, early voting, and less mail-in ballots, I think there are the right provisions in place, along with very hyperactive attorneys across the country that are making observations about the process and looking for irregularities in the polls. So I think this kind of oversight and what we call panopticon effect is going to mitigate a lot of the fraud that we saw in 2020.
Okay, all right. Stay on with me, Rick. I want to address this breaking development that is taking place. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is expected to cast his vote in Florida's Palm Beach, and this is going to take place shortly. He shall vote at his home precinct 5604, for which the voting site is the Morton and Barbara Mandel Recreation Center at 340 Seaview Avenue. Following this, he is also expected to host a watch party in the Palm Beach Convention Center. So I'm going to, I have with me Rakesh Malhotra. He's the president of the Global Indian Diaspora Foundation. Thank you, Rakesh, for joining us. And, all eyes are going to be on Donald Trump. He is going to be the highlight when he comes out and casts his vote in Florida.
Absolutely. It's going to be a very important day in the history of US election today. And we have seen very disturbed 4 years as far as economy is concerned, inflation is concerned. So I'm sure people are going to think about all those factors and going to vote. It's important that everybody should step out and vote for change.
Right, absolutely. Also talking about how has this campaign season been for the average American, the kind of issues that had been raised by Donald Trump, the others that have been raised by Kamala Harris. Which way do you think are the people of America swaying?
See, if you look at the election campaign, it started with Biden on the Democratic side, but then later he has to withdraw and Kamala Harris came in, and she eventually get about 110 days to campaign. Campaign from both sides are very, very exciting and very, very intense. And I think no campaign has left a stone unturned. The reason is very simple, because this election is going to be decided by the battlefront state, and those swing states are going to decide, and the margin will be within the 0.5 percentage point or 1% point.
Okay. All right. I'm also getting to know information that we'll put out on your screens very shortly. There's residents in the Indian village of Wadaluru who are waiting in anticipation of the US presidential elections, with some praying and hoping that Donald Trump wins, alongside his running mate J.D. Vance, whose wife Usha Chilukari Vance has ancestral roots in the village now. Should Trump win, Usha will become the first non-white US second lady. So of course anticipation right now high, and if J.D. Vance wins Grand Newsham, it is going to be his wife, who's of Indian origin, who is also going to be the second lady at the United States.
The importance of skin hue and even ethnic background. We are so mixed in America that those sorts of distinctions don't make a whole lot of difference. It's a very different United States than it was 70 years ago. And it is very interesting, though, J.D. Vance as a candidate, because I can't think of one for vice president or president for an awfully long time, if ever, maybe since Bill Clinton, who came from what you would call a less affluent background in that part of America that has just been ravaged by so-called globalization, by the CFO, the MBA classes, moving so much of our manufacturing overseas, much of it to China. Vance is from that background, and that is very unusual for us. But he also has experience really in the elite class. He's a Yale Law School graduate, and he's worked in the financial industry, so he knows that very well. But importantly, he's not of it. He's a very different creature. So he will be a very interesting addition if Mr. Trump wins. And often vice presidents, they don't amount to much. And in this case, though, I think it is possible that a fellow like J.D. Vance could actually represent really a class of America that has always often felt left out. So it'd be very interesting to see how it comes. But he's a unique character.
Okay, all right. Visuals on your screens. On the left-hand side, there are prayers, offerings that are being made at the temple in Tamil Nadu, which is the ancestral village of Kamala Harris. Remember, she has Indian roots in Tamil Nadu, in India. And on the right-hand side, you have in Andhra Pradesh those prayers being held in the hopes that it is going to be Donald Trump and J.D. Vance that are going to win this election. So there you have it. While I don't know if these candidates are more American than Indian, because I think that's what it is. But the sentiment of the emotional sentiment of the people here living in India is very much visible, as you can see on your screens. Rick, understanding from you, like does it really matter if it's an Indian American who is perhaps going to win the vice presidency, become the vice president, or it's going to be Kamala Harris with her Indian roots who could become the president? Do you think it really matters whether their lineage and whether their ancestral roots are going to be of any consequence to the way they chart out their plans and chart out their leadership roles and build about policies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for the average American or even the average Indian American that's going to cast their vote today, those identity politics would have mattered if the economy wasn't in such a dismal shape. Indian Americans have a commanding control of the GDP, one of the highest GDPs of any racial minority groups or racial groups in the entire country. And so the economy matters because many of us are small business owners. And when small businesses are crushed, inflation is high, interest rates are skyrocketing, and businesses continue to suffer. That's what's top of mind for Indian Americans, especially in swing states as they go to cast their ballot box. Now, when you talk about, some of these identity politics, I think, of course, there's a proud moment when candidates come from certain representation. But when you look at it at a deeper level, in terms of that representation, Donald Trump has been the only candidate that's actually voiced support for Hindu Americans. He's voiced support against Hindu Americans or Hindus in Bangladesh that were being persecuted against, and has supported, against religious violence, against religious violence across both the country and across the world. We have not heard that from Kamala Harris. She has not come out to support Hindus in Bangladesh. She has not come out with any policy positions that's going to bring ties between America and India closer. And in the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, we have not seen her actively working towards strengthening the relationships with India in a meaningful way that Donald Trump did in 2017 and through his presidency. And so when you're looking at across the board support for Indian Americans or relations between US and India, I think everyone knows the strong ties that Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump have and how that's going to look like come 2025.
Absolutely. It's an important point that you've raised, and I'm going to ask this question to Ambassador Yogesh Gupta as well. Do you think Donald Trump, when he has reached out to the Hindu Americans, he's spoken about the Hindus in Bangladesh versus Kamala Harris has not made any of those statements. She has not come out in public speaking in favor of the Hindu Americans. I wouldn't say speaking in favor, but then speaking about Hindu Americans and how her strategies are going to be. Like she spoke about the Arab Americans and speaking about Gaza. And things like that. Do you think Trump is more pro-Hindu, more India versus Kamala Harris?
I think so. I agree with the previous speaker, Mr. Mehta, that President Trump has spoken out very clearly in favor of India, in favor of Hindus, about his friendship with Prime Minister Modi. Whereas Kamala Harris has been more of an establishment candidate. She was generally a quiet nodder during the presidency of Biden. She didn't matter much. She didn't play much of a role either. Wherever Biden didn't want to go, he just deputed Kamala Harris to go. So far, Kamala Harris has been just reading from the brief handed over to her by the establishment, by the various departments of the US government. I don't think she has really applied her mind independently to those issues so far. So one is not very sure or very clear as to how she is going to, maybe as president she acts differently, but general expectation is that at least in the initial months, she is probably going to eat out from the hands of those in the various parts of the bureaucracy, the deep state, the US deep state. So to that extent, I think it will be a negative, in case she were to be elected.
Okay, all right. Let's also reflect this development that has taken place in United States. Now, despite worries, there haven't been any national level significant incidents, including in the cyber realm, impacting the security of America's election. There is a senior advisor at the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency who has stated that there were no significant incidents impacting the security of election infrastructure that have taken place. So that's a sigh of relief, which means that all is hunky-dory. Rakesh Malhotra, I think these incidents, far and few in between, isolated, and now finally you have the security of United States election infrastructure has at this point of time, all fears have been allayed, and the security forces have spoken about that there are no cybersecurity breaches that have taken place to mar the election process.
See, absolutely, it is for the administration to ensure in every county that elections are held free and fair. And so far, election has been on, early voting has been on, and today is a wonderful day. I don't see any threat of any cyber security, and I think authorities, administration have made sure that people are able to cast their vote free and fair, free from fear and without any difficulty. There are queues in some polling stations in the morning, but I think it is for the first time that we have seen the impact of early election, and people are there, and when enthusiasm is there, you cannot stop. And I think the people are going to vote for change.
Right, absolutely. All right, people are going to vote for change. Is it going to happen? Remains to be seen. It is going to take days for us to find out who is going to be the president of America in all likelihood. Whether it's going to be a blowover, unlikely as per the poll predictions that have been coming out with their projections for the last several weeks now. I'm going to come back to you, Grand Newsham, about the situation such as this, where there have been concerns with regards to breach in cyber security, some way of attacking the election process in America. Are these cases routine and should be taken as such, or there's some concern that has been raised? Do you think this such frequency of such incidents, or at least the fears that at this point of time are being raised about these bomb threats that are at this point of time being issued, about these cybersecurity incidents, about these cyber trolls that are functioning at breakneck speed, have they increased in frequency, especially as we become more tech savvy?
Well, I would note that I'm not all that worried about the bomb threats. We're kind of used to those sorts of things. But when it does come to sort of technology risks, I think that one can be premature in dismissing them. You look at throughout our entire lives, we're repeatedly warned about cyber criminals, cyber hacking, etc. Always told to change our passwords. And then when it comes to the actual process of voting and counting, we're told nothing to worry about, it's all great. And maybe it is, and I'll be delighted if that's the case. But it is a battlefield that needs constant watching. And I don't think anyone should rule out the possibility of real problems. If you're doing it right, you're not getting caught. But I would also note that in the last election, 2020, immediately afterwards, CISA, that you just mentioned, they announced that there had been no problems at all, none at all. And any claims that there were baseless, groundless, etc. And then 2 weeks later, the United States got hit by one of the biggest hacks that it ever has, the entire US, 2 weeks later. And one reasonably asks, well, how sure were you about the election?
Right.
So I think one should not sort of just take it easy on this. It is a huge problem. And also note that we're just talking about the counting day, the actual voting day and the counting. But the electoral process itself goes from much earlier, when candidates are announced, the campaign is run, and then you have a voting day, and then it goes to the post-election sort of steps, procedures. And those are considerable as well. And those all go into making up a free and fair election as the United Nations sees it. And that's where I think we should be paying a little more attention. But on voting day, I think one should always be worried, because when you lose confidence in the sanctity of an election that we all used to have, once that's lost, and I think a lot of the public has, that it's very hard to get it back. So I hope whoever's responsible is doing their job and are doing it as well as they say they are.
Okay, all right. We're also getting information now. The voters in New York City's East Village have shared who they voted after having cast their ballot at a polling station early on the US election day. Now, Americans seize their final opportunity to participate in the fiercely contested 2024 presidential race between the Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump. Listen in to these voters.
I was thinking about the future of this nation and, frankly, the free world. And that is a vote for Harris, is a vote for that. Trump is a retrograde, rolling us back into some land in his imagination.
Well, I think this election, I'll be glad when it's over. And I actually did vote for Trump. And I just feel like we need somebody to drive the ship.
Oh, I definitely voted for Kamala Harris, and I'm just very excited for the election to be over in the coming days, and I hope she wins by a landslide.
I think definitely, like, at the forefront of my mind was, like, abortion rights. That was definitely, like, the main issue I was going with. It's super scary that, like, Trump is trying to take that away, and, like, as a woman, I mean, like, in New York City, obviously it's different, but it's super messed up that, like, across the country, that particular right is, like, being taken away from people. Yeah.
I voted for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. This is the most consequential election of our lifetime. We're voting for the lives of our children, of our communities. We're voting for the sanctity of our democracy and a peaceful transition of power. It's the most important, I think, anything any of us have done in our lifetime. So.
Okay, all right. So those were some of the voters in New York who cast their vote, and a majority of them have said that they've cast their vote for Kamala Harris, for the Democrats. And there is a number of issues, particularly about the pro-choice support that they give to Kamala Harris. Rick, New York, which has traditionally been, a stronghold of the Democrats. The last election also, it was the Democrats and Joe Biden who won the state, talking about how there are, the largest percentage of immigrants reside in New York as well. Any chance, slim chance that this could go the Republican way?
Yeah, well, it's funny. Republicans and Democrats have found common ground, and that common ground is that everybody's tired of this election and everyone wants it to be over. That's overwhelmingly what we keep hearing, and everyone has election fatigue. I think you're going to be surprised at the ballot box and the turnout. Even in my home state of New Jersey and in New York, we've seen a significantly high number of Republicans voting early. And like I said before, early voting is a good indicator that people are getting more and more involved in this election versus previous elections where people sit out. And so this entire election, I think, is going to turn on what we call low propensity voters, those that are not engaged in the electoral process and those that are now coming out to vote because they're moved for one issue or another. And that's going to be on both sides. And the fact that Republicans seem to have a little bit of momentum in early voting where traditionalist Republicans vote on the day of, like myself, I think that's going to be interesting. And you're going to see some, I think, very, very unique outcomes. I'll tell you, in 2020, when I ran for U.S. Senate, the polls had us down by more than 38 points, and the results came out less than half of that, where Trump set the record, and myself and Trump set the record for the highest number of votes for the Republican Party in the history of New Jersey. So there are a lot of people. In fact, I have my purple tie on, in states like New Jersey and New York that are commonly Democrat. We see a blending of blue and red, and so you actually don't know what the outcome is going to be.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.